All right, today I want to go over one of the worst things that can happen on a paint job when you have adhesion issues. And I've been painting since 2006. I've seen this happen multiple times for a lot of different reasons, and each one's going to have a little bit of a different solution. But I just wanted to provide information and some knowledge out there in case you run into an issue like this, in hopes that I can help you identify the problem and what the solution is. So first, let's start with the most common reason why you're going to have an adhesion issue, and that's because the substrate, whatever you're painting, has a glossy or slick or shiny surface, and the product you're applying is going to have an issue actually bonding to that. That's actually more common on interior than exterior when that's the actual problem, and I've seen this happen in a lot of different scenarios. So first scenario is, if you go to paint something that's been lacquered or has even a polyurethane smooth finish on it, one of those clear coats, and if you just put some mediocre paint on that and that has a shiny surface, a lot of times if you try to scratch it off with your fingernail, it's going to come right off. Unfortunately, I know that sometimes that happens, especially with newer painters. You go to paint some cabinets or something and you don't realize that the paint actually didn't form a good bond. The best thing to do in that scenario is to remove as much paint as you can, sand down the surface, and then test different product solutions and make sure whatever you decide to go with is going to form a strong bond and adhere. Different paint manufacturers make, what's called bonding primers that are supposed to bond to things better. I made a video, I'll link it here, where I test some of the water-based newer bonding primers. A lot of the older traditional stuff would use non-water-based products like oil or alcohol or some kind of solvent because they tend to have better properties when it comes to bonding. Now, I've seen other scenarios where you're just painting over paint and you think everything's okay, but the paint actually won't adhere to the paint. There's a lot of reasons why. It could have a clear coat on there. It could have been like a colored lacquer that they used before. Some of the older oil-based paints, and you put a water-based product over it, can have some issues, and it stinks when you don't realize this till you're like almost done with the job or you've painted most of it already. But that is the most common reason on interior why that could happen. So especially if it's an older home or you're painting something that you're not sure what the previous product was that's on there, I would highly recommend doing a quick test before you get through the whole job and make sure that it's okay. You can even set that expectation when you're doing the estimate. Let them know, I'm a little concerned about whatever this is, and I'm going to give you a price that's this, but after I test, if I find out that I need to do more steps, I would have to do a change order and increase the cost for you. So the solution for that is just remove as much paint as you can, sand down the surface, and then usually apply a primer and then a paint. I know some paints, claim they're paint and primers in one, and I'm not going to go into that debate, but that's what I'm saying. Whatever you do, test it for that solution, because I've seen primers that are expensive that don't actually stick to it, even after a little scuff sand. So you need to just make sure that that solution is there. But basically, you're painting over something slick and it has no bite. It can't actually grab onto anything, and that's why the paint will just peel right off. All right, so now let's talk about more of an exterior issue. So I've seen this happen about 5 times on exterior paint jobs, and it is devastating when it does happen, because a lot of times there's no way to really tell that it's going to happen. There's no way to really prevent it until it's too late. So please drop your ideas in the comments and let me know other reasons why this might happen, but let me just explain a few things that can happen. So sometimes homeowners will use an insecticide on their house, and there's a bunch of different types of insecticides, but maybe they're using one that's like some kind of essential oil. They go around and they spray it on the bottom of the house, around windows, around door frames, and it's basically an oil-based product. Then a painter comes by, they power wash, they paint, but because you're using water-based paint, it doesn't form a bond. There's a lot of things that I think can come from insecticide, whether it's spraying for mosquitoes. I know in some areas where there's termites, they might even tent and fumigate a house that can leave a residue on the surface. Some other things that can happen is construction materials, especially on new builds. They have lot numbers and they're pumping out this siding, and there's going to be variations between the siding. Sometimes there is an issue with the siding. A lot of the boards today are pre-primed, meaning that they're ready for paint. But, in the manufacturing process, sometimes things get messed up. The mixture of the glue and the pre-prime and the process are just going to have issues. But something that can happen is with this composite wood is some of the wax can actually bleed through. And then when you go to paint it, you can actually have an adhesion issue because of that. So the two biggest issues are, it was originally on the house, it came from the factory. There's some kind of foreign contaminant that's usually not there, that's on the building materials, and it's usually not water-based. It's like a wax or an oil. material, and when you put a water-based paint over it or even a water-based primer over it, it won't form a bond. I mean, you can see here we were testing with Extreme Bond Primer from Sherwin. We were testing with, the General Multi-Purpose Primer. We were testing with the Peel Bonding Primer, and you can see just nothing is sticking because there's some foreign contaminant that's on the surface. I want to let you know, I don't want to scare you. This is an extremely rare thing, so I wouldn't be worried about this. I have only seen it a handful of times, but when it happens, it's devastating. And again, I just want to get you the information of what's going on. Most painters never run into this, or it's very rare when they do, but obviously the paint manufacturer, they're going to run into this. And you can tell a lot by when you look at the product data sheet and the instructions on painting. You'll notice here on Bears, it literally says to scrub it with a detergent. You'll notice Sherwin-Williams says something similar, and even Sherwin-Williams, for some of their products like Duration and Emerald, it says to use an oil-based primer for hardy board or composite board, which just shows, like, in my opinion, they're aware of this problem can happen, and that's why they tell you this in the instructions, so that if it does happen, they can say, hey, that's why it happened, and if you actually read the instructions, we told you to do it a different way. But the point is that this kind of thing happens, and you can kind of tell from the instructions like what the solution is, and basically there's a foreign substance on there. It could be insecticide, it could be hydrophobic material, it could be a lot of different things, and the solution is that you need to use a detergent, something that's going to cut through grease or oil or wax, and you need to wash the house with that detergent, and then again test, make sure that after you wash it, apply some product and make sure that it's actually going to stick. If it doesn't, I would switch up and use a different detergent. You're likely going to find one that actually does work. I would start with the eco-friendly, simple green, stuff like that, and then work your way up to more harsh or chemically products if that's not working. It could be, I know some people that wash windows and wash homes might use like a hydrophobic coating. Like you take your car through the car wash and they put that last mist on there that's like kind of hydrophobic coating to keep dirt from sticking to it. They can do that on homes too. And the idea is great. It's like, yeah, when it rains and dirt washes on your house, it doesn't stick, it just falls right off. But when you go to paint that, the paint won't stick. And obviously power washing isn't going to take that off. You're going to have to use some kind of detergent to get that off. Even Sherwin-Williams came out with their new product, the Emerald Rain, and even on that product, it's got some hydrophobic properties. That's their whole advertising thing, is that dirt won't stick to it, but neither will paint. If you use a different product and you have Sherwin-Williams Rain, you put it over there, it's not going to stick. So you might have somebody that buys a new home, the last time it was painted was the Emerald Rain, and they want to change colors, and there hasn't been time for that paint surface to kind of break down. You go to paint that house with like Duration or regular Emerald or something else, it's not going to stick, the paint is going to come off. So the easiest solution is to use a detergent, and then you can always resort to sanding too, especially if you notice that the surface is super glossy. Like the previous paint that's on there, who knows what it could be? It could be some kind of super high gloss paint that where it's just too slick of a surface to stick to, and you're gonna have to scuff sand to be able to get some abrasion on that surface so you get some bite so that your new product's gonna be able to stick on there. So to recap, when it happens, it's a big issue, and I'm sorry, it really stinks. It's up to you to try to decide on how you're gonna handle it with your customer. I understand if you're a new company, a big problem like this could really be devastating, possibly even make you go bankrupt, but hopefully you're in a position to where you can take care of your customer. You can't argue, I know it's common for contracts to have some kind of clause in there saying if there's something that's impossible to foresee and there is an issue with the underlying material that we're going to apply paint on to, that we can't be held liable for that. Like this situation here, you can see there's 3 different colors of paint on here. The previous paint didn't even bond. It was an issue where we just couldn't know about it. But my point is, the way you want to handle it with the client is explain, hey, here's the problem. There is a contaminant on the house that's preventing the bonders in the paint from forming a solid bond and sticking to the surface. It's likely a non-water-based contaminant, and you can mention the different things that I was just mentioning. Definitely check, make sure, like, was the previous paint that was on there, was it Emerald Rain or some kind of specialty product that had a slick surface? And usually you can create some relief for the homeowner knowing like, hey, I know what the problem is. And then I also like to explain like, we did exactly what our process is. We power washed, we caulked, we scraped, sanded, and primed anywhere where the paint failed, and we painted. This was something that really was unforeseeable and is extremely rare, but we're going to take care of you. We're going to identify the problem and the solution and get it done for you. So hopefully this video was helpful. If you paint long enough, you're inevitably going to run into this situation. I'm really sorry when it does happen, but hopefully now you're armed and equipped with some some more education and reasoning onto like what is actually going on here so that you can troubleshoot the problem and find a solution. Again, put your comments down below if you've had this happen and if there's some other reasons that you know of as to why the paint isn't sticking to the surface. But I hope you got some value, and I'll see you in the next one.